Now I am honored to introduce our presenters for the second half of this evening, each of whom is paying it forward by sharing their brilliance with you here tonight. Our first presenter is an English teacher at the Cambridge Rindge and Latin School, and she's here to talk to you tonight about how we can use critical theory as a tool to empower our students. So please welcome Ariel Maloney to the stage.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to begin tonight by offering you the same choice that I make to my students each semester, although most of them haven't actually seen The Matrix. You can take the blue pill, which keeps you in the world in which you're currently living, believing that these theories have no place in our schools or our lives or our world, or you can take the red pill, which wakes you up to a new reality and allow me to pull you out of the matrix of this. By the time my students reach me, they have been inundated with 16 years worth of bias about race, class, gender, sexuality. And this comes from the invisible culture of our media. Movies, TV shows, books, magazines, the internet, the news, advertisements, even our cultural touchstones. I see it in my own 3-year-old son's picture books and kids shows, and I remember it from my own childhood growing up in central New Hampshire as a young Jewish kid who never wanted to talk to the mall Santa at Christmas time. Whose stories do we tell? Who holds positions of power? How do they speak? How do they dress? What stereotypes do they fit? And none of us are exempt from this. We are all impacted no matter our age. Students, teachers, adults, children, no one is immune. To demonstrate this, I'd like to play a little game with you. All you have to do is imagine the people I'm going to describe. You can even close your eyes if you'd like. So, picture a boardroom full of business people. Was this who you pictured? What about a parent in a laundry detergent ad? Were you thinking of a mom or a dad? How about a gang member? Is the person you're imagining right now male or female, black, white, Latino, Asian, Don Corleone from The Godfather? Our perspectives and our assumptions are born from our culture, which is as visible and as a part of us as the air we breathe. What we consume through this invisible culture impacts how we think of ourselves and the world around us, our social and professional relationships, and the stereotypes and biases we will perpetuate. Can we even tell our students, don't be racist, don't be sexist, don't be prejudiced, be a good person, when we have been selling them these messages, which are in direct conflict with our ideals of equality, for their entire lives? Look, if I could just give my students a magic pill that would solve all of this, I would, but A, it does not exist, and B, I would probably get fired. The truth is, there's no simple tool we can use to negotiate that tension between our invisible culture and our ideal world, but there is a toolkit we can use, and it's called critical theory. Making meaning is never a neutral act. As historian Howard Zinn said, you can't stay neutral in a moving train. Critical theory recognizes this. I tell my students that applying theory is a little like applying digital photography filters. The text itself doesn't change, but the details we notice and the meaning we pull out of them, the ways we analyze them, and ultimately the big ideas that we extract from those texts all change depending on which lens we apply. Students wake up when they realize that there is more than one right way to read a text, that there are actually multiple valid ways that they can read a text, and that there is a whole toolkit they can use, which authenticates their perspectives and even helps them to better understand their identity and their place in the world. Like my student Randy, who said that before learning critical theory,
race and social class were something I never really recognized. I have learned to never be ashamed about my race again and express both my white and black side with pride.
And when we teach our students critical theories such as race, class, and gender, which believe that meaning is primarily derived from our political and social and cultural contexts, We can't help but teach students social justice. Theory doesn't only deepen their literacy and critical thinking skills. Theory helps them to become more thoughtful consumers of literature and of media, and more attentive to context and history. I can tell you this, but I think you'd rather hear from my students. I taught Ajani last semester and Ariana last year, and here are their thoughts.
There's a difference from like reading the text and like critically reading. So I didn't know much about gender or looking through gender lens, which was pretty limiting, honestly. So we read Raised in the Sun. Like, what do the women play? Like, what are their roles? How do they, interact with the other characters, and what do they represent? So
we read the book, The Great Gatsby. When I read the book for the first time, I never noticed how much class and gender actually affect characters and affect everyday people. How if you come from old money, you are more respected than if you have new money, which is something that I never thought about. I thought that if you were rich, you were kind of just rich. Like rappers, most of them are coming from new money. They probably aren't seen as the most respected people.
Like usually I just look at the text and be like, oh, it's just, it's a black grandmother. Her being a female, it helped me like peel the onion, I guess. Yeah.
Before I took that class, I didn't pick up on a lot of things that are very obvious. If you aren't willing to look for them, then you can just look past them, which I think it's so important to actually pay attention to every single detail.
Learning about critical theory really helped me, not necessarily just academia, but towards current events. Look at it in different lenses. I mean, it helps you try to understand perspective. I can't speak on behalf of women because I'm not a woman, but I need to at least try to understand. And it's made me more aware.
Theory requires us and our students to see systems of power and privilege, of marginalization, and the experiences of being silenced in characters' lives and conflicts. And this helps us to acknowledge and begin to dismantle and challenge the dominant stereotypes, which we know exist and are perpetuated by literature and informational texts and media. So to help my students understand how to do this process, one of the assignments I give them is to choose a piece of media, a TV show or an advertisement or a music video. And earlier this year, one of my students chose this Music Brown video. He examined the men's and women's costumes, the dance sequences, the real mixed messages of the plot line as he described it. And I quote, "It says that women should dress sexually and be quick to give it up to rich guys. But then this makes them untrustworthy and gold diggers. What do you want, Chris Brown?" When students challenge the cultural messages that they're being sold by the media, they're less likely to co-sign those messages, more likely to push back against them and affect change. Theory pulls my students out of the matrix of our invisible culture. Once they see these systems, they can't ever unsee them. Ultimately, theory gives my students a sense of justice about their place in the world, that what they're learning in school is not about what I'm asking them to read and write for a grade, or mastery, I guess, but that these things matter in their lives. Robbie is now a student at Middlebury College, and he wrote to me recently to reflect on his experience learning theory in my classroom in 2013. Light as good and dark as bad is one of the most consistent tropes in society that I can think of, just reinforcing a racial hierarchy, unintentionally or not. That was probably the first time that I thought of microaggressions or things in that vein. It's both interesting and painful to see how embedded all parts of society are with the thorns of racism, sexism, classism, ableism, etc. As a white, solidly well-off cis man, they're the sorts of things that it's easy to look right past and think nothing of because those thorns don't prick you. Looking at life through a critical lens is a large part of finding parts of our world that need scrutiny and engaging with them. And my colleagues, too, see the efficacy of theory. Our students are better able to make original and well-supported interpretations. They're more comfortable with nuance. And when they have fully internalized and metabolized these perspectives, they have more ability and more agency to put into practice the kinds of literacies that they will need to be thoughtful empathetic, reflective, critical thinkers and doers in the world. So hopefully by now, you've chosen the red pill. What comes next? How will you look at the media around us differently? How might you look at your own place in the world differently? How might you teach differently? How might you engage in conversations with friends, family members, and colleagues differently? What now? Thank you.